morning. I'm Bill Doherty. I want to welcome the viewers to another edition of Bill's Bullpen. Bill's Bullpen is a program that's intended to give folks an idea of what's going on both locally and in the region. And with me today I have Christine Mosher.
That's right.
Mosher. And Christine Mosher, tell the folks what you do.
Sure. I am a psychotherapist in private practice, and I have an office on Main Street in Buzzards Bay, and I specialize in athlete mental health. So I see athletes.
Mental health?
Yes.
You mean all those big egos and everything? They need mental health? I thought they were sort of the prima donnas, if you will, of the youth culture.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people think that way. We tend to glorify our athletes in our society and our culture, and sometimes we forget that athletes are human beings too. And they're just like any other human being who have needs and problems and issues that they need to deal with in their personal lives. So sometimes we glorify our athletes to a high standard, and we expect that they're going to just be, gods and perform at a high level all the time. But sometimes athletes are suffering in silence, and so they do need someone to talk to. And so that's an area of my expertise that I specialize in.
In the culture that I grew up in, there was I guess it must be the myth of the student athlete. Mm-hmm. Someone who, while they played sports, a sound mind and a sound body, and there's much to learn about teamwork and things of that sort. But there are certain ones that have great talent and ability. Mm-hmm. How do you not exhibit that? I don't know what the word would be, to take advantage of it, or how do you get started, or what would be the recommendation to a coach, let's say, to guide their athletes so that they don't get that complex about I'm number one and I'm absolutely worthy of not only praise but adoration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of coaches have to kind of deal with those kinds of personalities and egos, but I think if you're a coach that focuses on teamwork and camaraderie and working together as a team, I think that would be the best approach. I mean, you have people that are, very skilled and talented, and so you want them to operate and perform at their highest level because it benefits them and the whole team. But we also want to create a positive and affirming sport culture, one where everyone feels welcome and everybody feels like they're contributing to the team. Even if you're not playing in a game, if you're sitting on the bench, you want to feel like you're a part of this team and that you matter. And I think that, if a coach can achieve that with their athletes, then they're going to have a successful team and a happier team.
In looking at the happier team, I have I'm an old guy, so I have a lot of exposure. I knew a fellow that when he was in high school, he had a great fastball, mm-hmm. and he was poorly coached,
yeah.
and he threw his arm out. And as a result, it took him 7 years to get through college, mm-hmm. And from being a phenom, he basically was an alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and that was such a sad outcome, mm-hmm. because he was intelligent. He was in prep school when he threw out his arm. Those are the ones that, let's say, had potential and didn't make it.
Right.
And what we're talking about is people who not only had potential but did make it. Mm-hmm. What are some of the issues that that you hear in your practice that your say superstars, or let's say, or good athletes, mm-hmm. Tell you about?
Yeah. So what you brought up a good point. One of the things that I found interesting when I started working with athletes was I expected that athletes who are elite athletes and achieving at the highest level would have a strong sense of self-confidence, and that they knew all the things to do to take care of their health and their mental health and their nutrition, because you would just expect that they would have access to all those services. And what I found out was that people are not able to access services, and if they want to get help for their mental health or their physical health or nutrition, education, they have to seek it out. And so a lot of times athletes will suffer in silence. If they're struggling with an injury or a mental health issue, because of the stigma of seeking help and this mentality of, athletes are superheroes. Sometimes athletes who need help don't seek it out, so they're quietly suffering in silence, and that just contributes to depression or anxiety, and then it can lead to substance abuse issues. So that's why it's really important for athletes to feel like they're in a culture of safety and security with their team, and they can seek help if it's needed, and not feel like they're going to be judged or looked down upon or seen as weak.
So it suggests to me that when you hear about a pro athlete playing hurt, okay, that he's looking at a substantial income loss if he doesn't get on the field.
That's right.
Okay, and then I do recall that one of my granddaughters was on a high-level cheering team in high school, and she had a cut in her, I guess, a lesion or cut in her ACL, and of course, that's a very painful thing. And she never really got involved in, in cheering again once she recovered.
Yeah, it's too bad because female athletes are prone to ACL tears, and that's a very prevalent injury in athletes, and especially female athletes. So it's important for coaches to know how to train their athletes properly so they can focus on strength training as well as endurance and other fitness that suits their sport. When I was growing up, I did not have any access to strength training or any knowledge about how to take care of my body physically. We just go out there and run and do what our coach tells us to do. But athletes are in this mentality of like play through the pain and suck it up. So if you're injured and you are worried about your injury, you just tape up that ankle and get back out there and play. But now we're trying to kind of change that culture and try to let athletes know that it's okay to take care of your injury and to take a little time off for rest and recovery, and that coaches should be able to tell their athletes, like, we value you as a player on this team, and you can take the time off that you need to take care of your injury, and your spot will still be here waiting for you. Because there is that fear of losing your spot on the team. I felt that myself when I was playing soccer at Boston College. I had multiple.
Boston College?
Boston
You
College.
didn't tell me that before.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm a BC grad.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
BC Eagles, ever to excel. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So I played soccer at Boston College, and I had a lot of injuries. And at the time, it was like tape up your ankle and get back out there. After the game or something, you get untaped and you stick your ankle in an ice bucket, and you hope that the swelling goes down and the pain goes down. But pretty much you're getting back out there and playing with an injury. But now we're trying to change that mentality and trying to teach coaches and athletes that we don't have to suck it up and play through the pain, whether it be physical pain or mental pain or emotional pain. So we're trying to be a little bit more compassionate and more understanding, and trying to help athletes see that it's better to take care of yourself rather than continuing to injure yourself, and that could be a lifelong problem afterwards.
How do you get that message across?
Well, it's tough. A lot of coaches are, their main goal is to win, and that's understandable. That's part of playing sports. You want to win. But you can still have a winning team and be compassionate and caring about your athletes. So it's trying to meet with coaches and talk to them about helping them see their perspective in a different way, and helping them see that you can coach your athletes with a more positive and affirming attitude and get the best out of your athletes. And you don't have to make them, humiliate them or shame them or blame them into thinking like that they have to just suck it up and play through the pain.
Well, of course, since we both went through that process of being a person for others, next question I would have for you is how did you decide to orient your practice towards this particular discipline?
Yeah, so I became a social worker about 20 or so years ago, so it was kind of like a second career for me. And I did a lot of different work working with the homeless population. I worked for Housing Assistance Corporation on Cape Cod and the NOAA Homeless Shelter, and Carriage House in North Falmouth working with women and children. And then I kind of moved into the nursing home space and worked in nursing homes, helping the elderly and working with Alzheimer's patients and caregivers. But I've always been an athlete my whole life. I started playing sports as a young child. And as I said, I played soccer at Boston College, and I continued to play soccer afterwards. As a matter of fact, I founded the Cape Cod Women's Soccer League on the Cape.
Did you really?
Yes, yes. So when I had lived in Falmouth, I wanted to keep playing soccer, but there wasn't really a league on the Cape at the time. So I started one, and I continued to play, and I played for the Falmouth women's team, and other teams from different towns joined in, and we had a great league. So to answer your question, I wanted to see if I could combine a way of doing my career as a social worker and combining it with sports. So I looked up online one day and tried to do a little Google search about how can I combine my career as a social worker with working with athletes. And I came across this organization called the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. And it was a group of like-minded social workers who also cared about athlete mental health. They were clinicians and researchers and college professors from all around the country who were dealing with athletes and mental health issues. So I thought, wow, this is great. This is exactly what I want to be a part of. And I called up the president, and we had a great conversation. And so I joined the Alliance, and now I am on their board of directors, and I'm also the co-chair of the Clinicians Committee, and I run a monthly clinicians meeting to talk about issues related to athlete mental health so that other clinicians who want to learn about that can come in and educate themselves and then talk about other clinical issues that they might be dealing with their own clients.
One of my granddaughters has a master's in sports management, and is at a prep school where she coaches. Well, she teaches 7th grade, but she also coaches, and I can see that a lot of things that you're talking about, I begin to wonder whether or not she is looking at that, because in high school she was captain of 3 teams and so forth. So there's and of course my mother played boys hockey when she was.
Your mother did?
Yeah, my mother did.
That's incredible.
I never missed a ladies' day when I was growing up. So all of that. So sports have been.
She was a trailblazer.
I've been exposed to a lot of sports. I'm not much of an athlete, but I've been exposed to a lot of sports, all my life, especially from the women that I'm in time. Matter of fact, my daughter-in-law still holds a record with her track team, was it in her high school track team for the 440.
Wow.
There's all of that.
Yeah.
So athletics are a great part of a lot of families' lives.
Yeah, definitely.
And one of the, I guess the thing that comes to my mind is that how can a parent get beyond the showing up and yelling at the coaches because this kid's not getting enough, spending too much time on the pine and not enough time in the field. How do you get parents to get behind this? Because parents are an important part of it. Some of it I saw when my kids were going through Little League were that they were reliving the dream of what they couldn't achieve themselves, and they were sort of putting it on the kids. And one of my uncles was a coach in a Little League team, and I noticed he always played the same kids all the time. And I said, what about the other kids?
Right.
Because there was one good coach in the town that I grew up in, and what he did was, one season he played everybody, and they lost every game.
Oh.
The next season they all came back and they won every game.
Okay.
And the reason was he had a balanced team. So in terms of empirical evidence of experience of and observation, that it does do well to develop, let's say to invest the time and energy to develop people.
Yes.
Okay. So now we have a well-developed group of kids and young adults, because sports seem to, I guess, except for Brady and whatever he was doing, that once you get into your 30s, although I know several people who still play hockey and are involved with with different sports, that your ability diminishes. And how do you talk to people or get them to understand that that they're not alone and that the problems that they're facing, because I found this in mental health advocacy, that people with the stigma of asking for help, or say identifying themselves for needing help, are how do you get past that when when you're trying to advertise the let's say the help that is available?
Right. Well, right now I'm doing a lot of presentations and offering webinars. Yep, we have, thanks for bringing that up. I'm going to be doing a Cape Cod Athlete Mental Health Summit on May 5th at Barnstable High School at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
And I've brought together a panel of experts in the field, other clinicians and social workers and sports psychologists and a parent and a coach, and we're going to be talking about these issues.
Okay.
So,
could you talk about some of the people you're going to have there?
Sure. I have Jonathan Katz, who I found online. He is a sports psychologist who lives in Eastham, and he works with athletes on the professional level. So he's been in the field for a long time, so he's going to talk about how even professional athletes need help. And he has worked with several of them, and he has contracts with teams, and he's actually currently working with Barnstable High School athletic department and helping their coaches and athletes with learning and educating them more about mental health, which is great. And then Olivia Papakairos has a private practice in Boston, and she's somebody who I met through my kind of clinical social work, sport social worker network. And she's going to be talking about female athletes and the issues that are specific to female athletes. And again, we mentioned the injuries, the ACL tears, and also different issues that female athletes face, and mental health and eating disorders. She's an expert in female eating disorders.
Kids that are wrestlers.
Yeah.
One of my sons was a wrestler, and that was the big thing, making weight.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of sports where athletes are called to stay below a certain weight to able to participate in their sport, and sometimes that can lead to disordered eating and eating disorders. And female athletes often struggle with body image issues. Athletes of all different shapes and sizes play sports, but sometimes female athletes and even male athletes struggle with maintaining their athletic body while also trying to preserve their aesthetic body and trying to fit into what the societal norm says a body should look like. And that's a struggle. So sometimes, I say, for example, you're a female basketball player. So you're probably going to tend to be taller and maybe more muscular, and that's great for your sport. But it might not be great for what a female athlete is or female is supposed to look like in our society. So a lot of people will look on social media and compare themselves to other women and, oh, I'm too big, I'm too muscular, that's not acceptable. And so an athlete might struggle with that internally, and body image issues arise, and sometimes that can lead to disordered eating and eating disorders. We have another clinician, Jacob Sulak, and he's in Plymouth, and he is currently working as a therapist in private practice, and he also does consultation for Curry College in their athletic department. So he's going to talk about his work with college athletes and give a little bit more on the male perspective of things that men struggle with in sports. And then we have Ivana Press, who's a coach, a soccer coach, and she currently coaches at Sandwich High School, the varsity girls soccer team. She also played soccer and played semi-pro soccer for many years, and she was a participant in the Cape Cod Women's Soccer League that I started, and she was also a coach. And now she's a parent and has kids who are playing sports. So she's going to offer kind of like that broad perspective of being an athlete, a coach, and a parent of athletes. And just talk about the different struggles that parents have today. We brought up about kids and youth sports and parents. You know, it's a big struggle today. Kids who play sports are put under a lot of pressure at a young age, and they're kind of pushed to specialize in one sport at a young age, and then giving up other sports to do it. And then by the time they get to high school, they're kind of burnt out on sports because they've been playing sports since they were 3 years old. And it has become more of where back in the day when I played sports, playing sports was a stress reliever. It was something that you did for fun. It was a good time. You go out and you play sports with your friends. It's not too much pressure. You're having fun and you're learning a skill and, you know, progressing in your sport. Today, kids are feeling that sports is a stress inducer. It becomes a job, it becomes pressure, it becomes parents and coaches yelling at you. And you know, oh, I have to specialize in this one sport, I have to sign up for this club team, I have to play this sport year round, I have to go away every weekend and play sports in different states and pay money, a lot of money to play sports. And that's not how it used to be. And I don't really think that that's how sports should be today. I think that sports should be something that's fun, educational, something that develops your self-esteem and self-confidence. And if you have an athlete who's being pushed too hard, they're not going to enjoy it anymore. If you have an athlete whose parents are yelling at them on the sidelines and then questioning them after the game, like, why did you do that? You should have done this. Then the kid's not going to say this is fun. You know, it's like they make them feel badly about themselves. And that's the opposite of what we want. We want kids to enjoy the sport and keep the joy in the game.
My recollection of my own youth was I never remember any organized athletics. And there was, I guess that was the beginning of Little League, but I do remember we did a lot of pickup games, and the big thing that you wanted to do was you wanted to get picked for a side. Mm-hmm. Okay, we used to, in summers, there was a lot of idle time, mm-hmm. and you know, and I think that that part of childhood should have open space,
yeah.
Where you can just sort of look at the clouds or go, or just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've kind of lost that in our culture today. There's so much digital entertainment. Kids are on their cell phones and, participating in social media and video games and things like that, and it kind of takes away the enjoyment of playing sports and being outside and just enjoying nature and kind of making up your own games with the neighborhood kids. That's how I grew up too, like going outside and playing a pickup street hockey game or, shooting some hoops and, basketball in the front yard.
I remember playing a lot of horse.
Yes.
With my asshole buddies. So I remember all of that.
Yeah.
And it was just, hours and hours of, just, being on a court.
Right.
And that doesn't seem to be present anymore.
Right.
I go by a lot of tennis courts that are empty mm-hmm. now. There doesn't seem to be any pickup games,
yeah.
That are going on, and of course, it is concerning mm-hmm. Because we are forcing in my opinion, we're forcing our children, let's say, to assume an adult role, or let's say, or fit into an adult experience mm-hmm. because of the pressure from, let's say, and I think it's well intentioned.
Yeah. But
a lot of times, well intentioned pressure doesn't take into account of, let's say, of some of the outcomes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And our other panelist on the panel is Jeff Worrell, and he has been a coach and a parent of athletes, and he's going to talk a lot about that, about like youth sports and the parental involvement and how parents can sometimes be a detriment to their child's development and their ability to figure out problems for themselves. Mm-hmm. The way we have things structured now, everything's kind of overseen by adults, and kids don't have the ability to kind of go out there and play in your backyard and like figure out their own problems and figure out how to make up a team and, fend for themselves kind of thing, which, develops a lot of problem-solving skills and self-confidence. If we have somebody else doing that for us all the time, you miss out on that opportunity to grow. And I think that's one of the things that kids in youth sports miss out on today. So
the scariest thing as a parent for me was I used to let my kids do stuff and they would make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And my feeling was that if I jumped in and solved their problems, that they would never grow up. Mm-hmm. Okay, because part of the process of maturation, in my opinion, is facing difficulties, perhaps failing, and then learning how to cope with
right.
that on your own.
That's right.
Because I remember when I sent one of my daughters she went to college in the next town over, and she could have stayed at home. But my opinion was, if she stayed at home, she wouldn't have had the experience of, let's say, learning how to live independently.
That's right. Yeah.
So, let's say it was a community. She did the. It wasn't a community college, but it was a 2-year program for nursing, and then she finished her bachelor's at UMass Boston. But for those 2 years, she lived away from home, and then she became independent and went to work and so forth. So I'm a great fan of kids do not grow up unless they learn to cope with the things that their mistakes.
Right, and that's why there's a lot of anxiety in my clients. I do have kid clients from age 10 and up, and there's so much anxiety in kids today. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media and all the technology that we have, and also a lot of it has to do with what we're talking about, where we kind of have hover parents, and I can take account for that too. I've also been a hover parent. I have 2 grown children, and parents don't want to see their child suffering. Of course we don't. We want our kids to be happy, and sometimes we feel like we have to jump in and solve their problems so that they're not suffering. But the long-term effects of that is that the child doesn't learn how to deal with their own feelings, and they don't learn coping skills on how to manage things, how to manage feelings of being upset or hurt or frustrated. If someone's going to come in and fix it for you all the time, then you don't have to do anything. You just let somebody else fix it for you. But that's not good for long-term development and growth and developing independence and being adult in today's world. You have to learn those skills. And a lot of times kids have this anxiety and social anxiety because they haven't been kind of given the opportunity to figure those things out.
Well, I recall that my grandmother, when I used to bitch and moan about different things, and I would go through a whole process of I get this problem or that problem, and she would say at the end of that, and not in what I'd call professionally coached language, something effective. Well, you seem to understand what your problem is, so I'm sure you'll figure out a way of solving it.
That's great.
And that's the best advice to get.
Right.
Now, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of this.
Oh, wow, it went by so fast.
Of course. It's your subject. What kind of a takeaway would you want folks to have from, let's say, from both the program, which they may, which may have gone past by the time, the program goes out. But what do you want folks to take away from what we've talked about?
I would say I would like people to start thinking about athletes as human beings too. Athletes are human beings, and we don't need to glorify them and hold them up on pedestals. We need to listen to them and to allow them to express their feelings and to be vulnerable and not judge them for that, and to make them feel comfortable seeking help if they have something that they're struggling with. And then I would say, like in our culture, it would be great if coaches could be more open to having conversations with athletes and make them feel that it's okay to talk about these things within their teams and their sport, so we can kind of create a culture of more acceptance and more compassion. And I think that that's kind of the way we want to go, and maybe like having parents understand that it is good to have your kids involved in sports. There's a lot of positive benefits of being a kid athlete, but try not to pressure them too much and try to let them enjoy the sport. Try not to make them, push through and tell them this story that you're going to go to this great high school and you're going to go to this great college and you're going to become a professional, you're going to live life happily ever after. That happens for some kids, but not the majority. So maybe take a step back, let your child enjoy the sport, and let them explore different things that they might want to do as well, other than sports, like art and music and drama and going outside in nature.
From our mutually shared education at the Heights, the motto was ever to excel.
That's right.
So perhaps what we're getting at is it's to excel at being a human being,
right,
as opposed to excel at being a particular part of all of that.
Yes.
Because it isn't what you do, it's who you are that's important.
That's so true. Yeah, the athlete identity is really important, and sometimes athletes feel like this is all who I am. There's nothing else that's valuable to me. But sometimes after you retire from your sport, whether it be to injury or age, you realize that you might have put so much focus on being an athlete that you've kind of forgotten to develop these other parts of you or to explore these other parts of you that are also valuable.
And with that thought, I think that we've come to the end of the program. I appreciate people watching this because I think it's important to understand that we are surrounded by a lot of talented, let's say physically talented kids, but that's only one part of them. So we have to look at let's say at the whole person holistically. We have many parts, and we shouldn't listen just to the one story that a person has, but the whole gamut of stories. So anyway, thanks. I want to thank the viewers for taking the time to watch this. I think we've all learned a lot, and with that, I want to say this has been a production of Bourne TV.